Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm bringing you a brand new Sudowoodo card, which has just been revealed a couple of hours ago, so I've run home from work to tell you all about it. It is coming out in the Sun and Moon Strengthening Expansion Pack, the Sun and Moon 1.5 expansion. We don't know how we're getting it at the moment, but as soon as we know, I promise you I shall make a video about it. Now, most of the standard things look a little bit rubbish here. 100 HP is quite low, weakness to grass is bad because of stuff like Lurantis, fighting might be a good type, but will 40 damage for 2 energy, and, put it this way, either you're playing fighting energy, so you have better attackers, or you're not playing fighting energy, so you can't attack with it. I'm going to make it nice and simple. You are playing it for the ability here. Side note, 100 HP means you can't use level ball, which kind of sucks. The ability is blocking path, makes a lot of sense if you've been playing the Sun and Moon video game. When this Pokemon is in play, your opponent can only have 4 Pokemon on their bench. If they have 5 or more bench Pokemon, they must discard until they have 4. If there are other effects, the lowest number takes priority. What that's basically saying is, if there is a Parallel City boosting them down to 3 bench Pokemon, and then you play Sudowoodo, you actually do nothing because Parallel City takes effect. If they were to then replace Parallel City with something like, Rough Seas, well then they would be able to go up to 4 Pokemon, but Sudowoodo would still kick in at that stage. This is awesome. Now, eagle-eyed people that have been around for a while might notice this is basically the same ability as the Ditto from Triumphant. Now, that didn't see a huge amount of play, but I think there are reasons to believe that this will see a lot more play than Ditto did. Now, first of all, it's an ability, so it will be turned off by Hexmaniac and Garbodor, and it's a basic, so it will be turned off by Alolan Muck and Silent Lab. Although, of course, Hexmaniac only works for 1 turn. So you gain the extra bench space for now, but at the end of your opponent's next turn, Hex wears off, Sudowoodo comes back in terms of his ability, and you're back to 4 bench Pokemon. Now, there is a fun little trick you can do with this. If you've got 4 bench Pokemon, including a Shaman, that your opponent is going to want to Lysander and KO for 2 prizes, you can actually play a Hexmaniac, bench a 5th Pokemon, wait to the end of your opponent's next turn, Hexmaniac wears off, Sudowoodo comes in, you then discard your Shaman, and you can kind of use Hexmaniac here to swap a Shaman you don't want on your bench for a Pokemon that you do. Just a fun little thing you might want to take advantage of. Now, I've mentioned it already, think Parallel City. Parallel City sees a huge amount of play in a lot of decks, including decks like Yveltal, because you can limit your opponent's bench and really stop them being able to get enough bench Pokemon to work their magic, so to speak. Thing is, how do people get around Parallel City? Well, they play their own stadium, but you can't bump Sudowoodo with a stadium. You have to use something like Hexmaniac, which only works for a single turn, or something like Garbodor. So, there is fun to be had here. I think it could see a bit of play. Now, there are some decks that really rely on having a large bench. Think Rayquaza, think Incineroar, think Raichu, and even something like Mega Gardevoir that wants to have lots on its bench. And what all of these decks have in common is that they are going to play Skyfield. And they are going to want to play Skyfield to have 8 bench Pokemon. So you play Sudowoodo here, and you can let them have their Skyfield. They go down from 8 bench Pokemon to 4, and it doesn't matter. It's not like, oh, they've bumped my stadium, I'll get another Skyfield, because it's not a stadium that's done it. And decks like Rayquaza are going to be really reliant on abilities, so they're not playing Silent Lab, and they're not playing Garbodor. And of course, Incineroar needs Fire Pokemon on the bench, which means it's not going to be going and having a Garbodor to turn off Sudowoodo. This could be a really good tech against decks like this, although Raichu could afford to play Garbodor if it really wanted to. Gardevoir as well is really quite reliant on abilities like Hooper, Shaman and Dragonite, so they are unlikely to be playing something like Skyfield or Garbodor. Sudowoodo could single-handedly almost lock these decks out of the game, or at least vastly reduce the amount of power. So it is really something to bear in mind. If you've got a problem with a deck like Rayquaza, this could be the card for you. Of course, it could also be hilarious in mirror matches. You play one Sudowoodo in the Rayquaza mirror so that your opponent has their bench limited while you get to go nuts with yours. You cannot play a Parallel City in the Rayquaza mirror because you put your own bench down to 5 because you're not playing Skyfield, but you can play Sudowoodo. Now, even against decks that don't rely on having a huge bench and don't play Skyfield, it can just really slow them down. Stop them benching another backup attacker. I mean, there's too many examples to go into, but take something like Decidueye. 2 damage counters per turn from each Decidueye. So what you do here is you play a Sudowoodo, and then maybe your opponent has 2 Decidueye rather than 3, which means they're dropping 4 damage counters a turn rather than 6. This could have a huge, huge advantage. Now, of course, and I did kind of skirt around this a little bit earlier, there is every possibility you play Sudowoodo, your opponent discards a Shaman and gives you a big thumbs up because you've done them a big favour. Well, okay, there's always that. But this just has so many uses. Now, I know Ditto didn't see a huge amount of play, but Parallel City has seen loads. And I know Parallel City bumps your opponent down to 3 bench Pokemon, whereas Sudowoodo lets them have 4, but Parallel City is a stadium that gets easily bumped when your opponent plays a counter stadium, whereas Sudowoodo has to either be KO'd or have the ability turned off. And yes, I know some decks are going to play Silent Lab and some decks are going to play Garbodor, but plenty of decks won't. There's also a little bit of irony here because your opponent's going to be playing Garbodor, using their 5th bench space to turn off Sudowoodo so that they can have a 5th bench space that they wouldn't need except to play the Garbodor to turn off the Sudowoodo to give them the 5th bench space. I could keep going, but I hope you get the point. The other huge advantage, of course, of Sudowoodo is that being a Pokemon, it is searchable using cards like Level Ball or the Can Get Any Basic Pokemon Nest Ball, video link in the description, and of course, that means that you can find it much more reliably than you would be able to find a card like Parallel City. Now, I can't sit here today and tell you Sudowoodo is going to be amazing, Sudowoodo is going to see a huge amount of play. What I can tell you is that Sudowoodo is going to be an amazing tech against some decks, especially those that really need to have a large bench, like Rayquaza, like Incineroar, like Raichu. And because of that, I am giving it between 3 and 4 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies, that would be barbaric. I could see Sudowoodo being a really widely played tech in a lot of decks. I could see it seeing occasional play in some decks that have specific bad matchups. But this is a good card, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't have any doubt about that at all. Now, you know the deal. There is a comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. There are buttons to both like this video and subscribe to this channel. Could I please request you use them both? It would make me very happy indeed. You can follow me on Twitter @TheWassie, and the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.